The distress beacon had been transmitting for 42 cycles without reply. Its thin, mechanical voice echoed to control chamber of Halcyon Reach, looping the same plea into the void. This is Halcyon Reach Station. We are under siege by the Draxon Hive. Civilian lives at risk. Any vessel, any civilization, respond. The chamber smelled of coolant and burned metal. Cracks split the ceiling panels where plasma fire had struck weeks before. Power relays flickered in uneven rhythms, shadows stretching across the weary faces of the station's council. Counselor Syrah adjusted her translation harness and forced her throat to form words through its rasping pain. Keep the beacon running. A fellow counselor, scaled and orange-skinned, slammed a fist on the table. For what purpose? No one is coming. The core worlds turn away. The trade guilds seal their lanes. We have shouted into silence. Syrah met his eyes, refusing to lower hers. Her species' translucent skin showed the blue veins pulsing beneath, a testament to stress. Then we shout louder. As long as one voice survives, there is still a chance. The chamber erupted in weary argument. Some demanded surrender to the hive, others clung to pride. None spoke of hope. Outside the station's cracked viewports, the dying star glowed red, its surface boiling in slow agony. Around it, the hive ships drifted in patient orbit, organic masses of chitin and muscle, lit by the faint shimmer of their bioreactors. Like predators circling wounded prey, they did not strike yet. Hunger made them patient. Far across the system, within the hive's flagship, Marshal Xorka extended a cluster of sensory tendrils into the tactical stream. The alien's mind spread to the brood like a tide of will. Its many voices converged into one thought. This station is already ours. The weak delay only prolongs their despair. Xorka watched the endless beacon pulses with contempt. Pathetic, the hive voice whispered into itself. They call to the stars, yet no stars answer. They will serve as food. On Halcyon Reach, a low rumble signaled another system's failure. The last shield generator shuddered and dimmed, its hum falling into silence. Panic rippled through the station's civilian sectors. Mothers clutched their children. Refugees pressed against bulkheads, whispering that it was over. Syrah closed her eyes, listening to the quiet after the shield's death. For a moment, she believed the scaled counselor was right. They were abandoned. Then the sensor array wailed. Technicians scrambled at their consoles, shouting over each other. A pale amphibian officer croaked in disbelief. Contact detected. Multiple vessels, inbound vector. Transponders registering foreign. Not hive, not council fleet. Every voice in the chamber froze. Put on the screen, Syrah ordered. Static filled the display before resolving into shapes. Ships, scarred and uneven, engines burning white-hot against the dark. Their hulls were ugly by galactic standards, plated with crude armor, bristling with weapons that looked more like industrial tools and refined constructs of spacefaring empires. There were fewer than a dozen. No escorts from the core. No mighty dreadnoughts of the guild fleets. Only battered destroyers and corvettes advancing straight toward the high blockade. One of the technicians whispered, "They're transmitting origin code Earth." The chamber fell silent. Even those who mocked the beacon did not speak. Earth, the death world. The predator species no one trusted. Primitive, volatile, violent. The comms crackled. A human voice, rough and unadorned, cut through the static. Halcyon Reach. This is Commander Elias Cade, ISS Blackthorn. Distress call received. You needed help. We're here. The words echoed across the chamber. Counselor Syrah stared at the screen. The human ships carried scars from countless battles. Pitted hulls, blackened plating, welded reinforcements where more advanced species would have rebuilt. These were not fleets of prestige. They were survivors made into weapons. The scale counselor spat. Deathworlders. They will only bring more death. Better to face the hive without them. Syrah's gaze hardened. The beacon had called, and someone, anyone, had answered. Better Deathworlders in silence. The view shifted to the tactical overlay. The human fleet ignored traditional caution. Instead of waiting, instead of scouting, they accelerated straight toward the hive encirclement. It was madness. It was defiance. Refugees gathered near the station's viewports as the newcomers streaked across the void. Some gasped in fear, others in awe. For the first time in months, whispers spread that maybe, just maybe, they were not alone. Within the hive flagship, Marshal Xorka absorbed the new arrivals into its tactical awareness. The hive voice hissed, amused and intrigued. Meat-born predators. Feral children of a cursed world. They come to challenge inevitability. They will feed us well. On the human flagship, Blackthorn, Commander Elias Cade leaned forward in his chair. His eyes were shadowed by exhaustion, but sharpened with focus. He had heard the silence of abandoned colonies before, had felt what it meant when no one came. That would not happen here. Fleet, hold formation, he ordered. His voice carried no grandeur, no ceremonial weight, only certainty. We cut a path. No half measures. These people call for help, and they will have it. The crew's responses came back crisp, disciplined, unwavering. Out beyond the viewport, the swarm shifted, preparing to strike. The battle was inevitable now. Sarah's throat constricted as she watched the humans advance. She had begged the stars for an answer and received predators wrapped in steel. Could such creatures be salvation? She did not know, but she knew this. They had come when no one else did. The beacon continued its lonely call, though now it had a reply. The control chamber of Halcyon Reach trembled as another shockwave rattled the station's outer hull. Every vibration reminded the council how little time remained, yet no one looked at the structural warnings flashing red on the displays. All eyes stayed fixed on the human fleet streaming toward them. Crude destroyers, armored corvettes, hulls patched with uneven plating. To galactic eyes, they resembled scavenger craft, not warships. Yet they flew in disciplined formation, engines roaring like predators charging prey. Counselor Sarah gripped the edge of the table. She felt her pulse hammer beneath her translucent skin. For weeks she had prayed for any answer, but she had not expected them. Deathworlders. The comms link cleared again, sharper this time. A man appeared on the central holo display. His uniform was plain gray, shoulders squared, his face marked by sleepless nights and battle scars. "This is Commander Elias Cade, ISS Blackthorn," he said. His voice carried neither flourish nor apology. "We received your distress call. You're under siege. We're breaking the blockade." The council chamber erupted. "You cannot," the scale counselor shouted. His frills flared with agitation. "You'll only provoke them further. This station cannot withstand retaliation." Another, furred and hunched with age, added, "Their ships are toys compared to high broods. They will be slaughtered, and we with them." Elias's expression did not change. He waited until the outcry faded, then spoke again. "You call for help. We came. We don't have the luxury of fear. Neither do you." The words landed like steel against stone. Sarah found her voice. "Commander, why?" Others heard our call and turned away. What does Earth gain by answering? For the first time, a shadow of weariness touched his face. He leaned closer, as though addressing not the council but her alone. "Because we remember being ignored," he said. "Once, Earth called for help and no one came. We swore never again. Not for ourselves, not for anyone." The chamber fell silent. Even the doubters could not summon a reply. Sarah lowered her gaze, throat tightening. She had heard tales of humanity's violent history, their world's endless storms, predators, and plagues. She had never considered that such suffering forged not only warriors, but also a refusal to abandon others. The technician at the tactical station interrupted. "High vessel shifting. They've detected the newcomers. Vectoring intercept." On the main screen, swarms of chitinous shapes detached from the high blockade and accelerated toward the humans. Their bioreactors flared with predatory hunger. Elias's voice returned, clipped and firm. "Fleet, Titan formation. Prioritize their carriers. Watch your spacing. Swarms will try to envelop. Weapons free." His tone carried no hint of hesitation, only command. The holo display split, showing multiple human bridges. Men and women in patched uniforms moved with efficient precision, faces taut but resolute. They looked nothing like the polished admirals of the core fleets. These were fighters who had bled before, who expected to bleed again. One of the counselors muttered. "They march into death as if it is routine." "Perhaps," Sarah said softly, "but they march." On the Blackthorn, Elias adjusted his restraints as the deck vibrated under engine burn. The hive swarm was closing fast. Rail batteries spun up, their metallic whine filling the air. "Helm, bring us 30 degrees up. Target-led drone cluster," he ordered. "Aye, Commander." He glanced at his second officer, a woman with close-cropped hair and dark eyes. "Any word from the station?" "They're watching, sir. Some think we're mad." Elias allowed the faintest smile. "Let them. Madness works if you aim it well." Back on the station, refugees crowded near viewing ports, pressing against reinforced glass. Children clutched guardians as the unfamiliar ship streaked toward battle. Whispers rose among them. Humans, Deathworlders, monsters, saviors. Sarah stood with them briefly, watching the crude destroyers accelerate into the swarm. Her people were not warriors. They had survived by treaties and diplomacy. To her, the humans looked terrifying, predators unleashed into the void. And yet, for the first time in months, she felt something stir in her chest. Not fear, not despair, something else. Hope. Within the high flagship, Marshal Exor Ka extended its awareness through the swarm. The newcomers burned bright against the void, reckless and unflinching. Curious, dangerous, primitive weapons, fragile hulls, yet no hesitation. Why do they charge? The hive mind whispered to itself. Test them, break them, then consume. Thousands of drones surged forward, chitinous wings unfolding, organic cannons spitting luminous streams. The swarm roared like a tide of teeth and fire. Elias tightened his grip on the armrest. All batteries, open fire. The void erupted. On the station screens, streaks of light flared as rail slugs tore through chitin, ripping drones apart in clouds of gore and molten fragments. Nuclear detonations blazed like miniature suns, vaporizing swaths of the swarm. The counselors leaned forward in shock. No one had expected such ferocity. The scaled one muttered, almost against his will, "They fight as if born for this." Cyril whispered, "Perhaps they were." On Blackthorn, alarms wailed as impact struck the hull. Crews staggered, righted themselves, returned to stations without hesitation. A Corvette beside them vanished in a blaze of organic fire, yet the line held. Elias kept his voice steady, unyielding. "Stay on target. Don't give them the initiative." Through the viewport, he saw the high blockade begin to shift, startled by the humans' advance. The predators had met prey that refused to flee. On Halcyon Reach, the civilians erupted in shouts as the first wave of the swarm faltered. For the first time in memory, the hive recoiled. Counselor Sarah pressed a trembling hand to the viewport. The human ships were battered, crewed, outnumbered, but they fought with what the galaxy had long forgotten. She remembered Elias's words. "We remember being ignored." Perhaps that memory made them dangerous. Perhaps it made them the only hope left. The void outside Halcyon Reach ignited. Thousands of hive drones hurled themselves against a human line. Chitin wings spread, organic cannons spewing molten plasma. Their shrieks carried across comm intercepts, a sound that clawed at nerves even through digital filters. Human destroyers answered with rail slugs, each round screaming across kilometers in a fraction of a second. The first volley ripped holes in the swarm, drones bursting apart in sprays of ichor and broken wings. Yet the tide closed as quickly as it opened. On the Blackthorn, Commander Elias Cade braced as impacts rattled the hull. The deck shook beneath his boots. Warning glyphs blazed red along the command displays. "Forward shields at 60%. His second officer called. "Keep them focused front arc helm. Drift us 4 degrees down. Bring batteries to bear on that cluster at 10 o'clock. The ship groaned as thrusters fired, but the maneuver carved a path through the swarm. Rail cannons fired in relentless rhythm, shredding chitinous bodies into fragments. "Sir, Corvette Vigil reports hull breach." "Patch them through." A frantic voice filled the bridge. "We're losing pressure in Deck 4. Fire's spreading." Static swallowed the rest. Moments later, a bloom of light flared across the void. The Vigil was gone. No one on the bridge faltered. They simply adjusted formations, closing the gap. Inside the station, Counselor Sarah watched the battle unfold across tactical holos. Every detonation reflected in her wide eyes. Fear battled awe. The humans' crewed ships were torn apart one after another, but each death carved deep wounds into the hive. "They cannot last," muttered the Scale Counselor, his voice heavy with grim certainty. Sarah shook her head. "No, they refuse to yield. That changes everything." On the battlefield, Elias's fleet pressed forward. They did not retreat to defensive posture, as any other navy would have. Instead, they plunged deeper, driving straight toward the hive carriers at the blockade center. "Range closing," Tactical reported. "Drones thickening around carrier Alpha. That's our mark. Concentrate fire." The swarm tightened in response, a living wall of chitin and fangs. Hive strategy was simple. Smother the prey until nothing remained. Against most foes, it worked flawlessly. Against humanity, it faltered. Missiles streaked from the Blackthorn and her escorts, each warhead tipped with nuclear yield. Dozens were shredded by interceptors, but enough broke through. The explosion seared the void white, tearing open one carrier's flank. Alien ichor boiled into space, burning like fire across its organic hull. Cheers erupted on the Blackthorn's bridge. Elias did not join them. He knew what would come next. Marshal Exarchah felt a wound to its swarm link, rage pulsing through every drone. The prey had cut deep, deeper than expected. That could not be tolerated. The hive surged with renewed fury. Drones hurled themselves at the human destroyers, tearing into armor, latching onto hulls with hooked limbs. One frigate vanished under a writhing mass of insects, hull collapsing inward as it devoured whole. Elias barked orders. "Gunners, peel those things off. Helm, roll a starboard now." The Blackthorn rotated sharply. Drones clinging to hull were flung loose into the void, shredded by a withering barrage of autocannon fire. The ship's plating smoked, but it held. In the viewing chamber, refugees gasped at every explosion. A child tugged on Sarah's robe. "Will they win?" he whispered. Sarah knelt, forcing steadiness into her voice. "They will not stop. That may be enough." The boy's wide eyes reflected the distant flashes of nuclear fire. For the first time in his short life, he saw someone fighting back. Back on the battlefield, the humans' advance cut dangerously close to the high flagship. Elias gripped the armrest, sweat beading his forehead. His fleet was bleeding. Ships gone, ammunition dwindling, but the blockade was breaking. Status on the carriers? He asked. Alpha heavily damaged. Beta holding. Gamma untouched. We can't take them all head-on. Shift everything onto Beta. Break their spine. His officers obeyed without hesitation. Missiles roared, railguns hammered, and corvettes darted into suicidal flanking runs. Beta carrier buckled under the storm, organic plating ripping apart, its reactor pulse unstable, then erupted in a blinding sphere that consumed half its swarm. The explosion rocked Blackthorn hard enough to throw Elias against his restraints. Alarm screamed. The crew scrambled to contain fires. Through it all, Elias forced his voice calm. We're still here. Keep firing. Marshal Exorca reeled in fury. 2 carriers destroyed. Drones obliterated by prey too fragile to matter. It extended its awareness across the swarm, gathering reserves for a final, overwhelming strike. Burn them all. On Halcyon Reach, counselors leaned close as tactical feeds shifted. A massive concentration of drones formed at the blockade's core, building into a single tide. Even Sarah's confidence faltered. They're pulling everything, she whispered. If the humans break, the station falls with them. The scaled counselor lowered his gaze. Then perhaps we were wrong to summon them. Sarah turned sharply. No, without them, we were already dead. On the bridge of Blackthorn, the swarm swelled across the screens. Drones blackened the void in numbers beyond reason. Elias knew they couldn't hold forever. But forever wasn't required. Transmit to the fleet, he ordered. Every ship, every cannon. Throw it all. This is a push. Sir, if we burn everything now, there won't be a later. Do it. The humans unleashed their full arsenal. Railguns overheated, barrels glowing red. Missile bays spat their last reserves. Nuclear detonations flared one after another, carving tunnels through the swarm. The void became a storm of light and debris. The Hive pressed back, but for the first time in centuries, their advance faltered. The blockade cracked. Elias's vision blurred from exhaustion, yet he forced his voice steady. Station control, the gap is open. Get your civilians out. Now! Sarah's voice came back, trembling yet firm. We see it. Your fleet, you've done the impossible. Not impossible, Elias said. Just necessary. In the Hive flagship, Marshal Exorca shrieked across the swarm link. The prey would pay in fire, but its certainty wavered. For the first time, the Hive felt doubt. The battle still raged, but the tide had shifted. Against all reason, fragile human ships had broken the unbreakable. On Halcyon Reach, the refugees erupted in cheers that drowned out alarms. For the first time since the siege began, they believed survival was possible. And Sarah, watching the battered fleet hold the line, whispered to herself, Deathworlders, you may yet save us all. The storm had passed, but scars remained. In the wake of the battle, wreckage drifted in every direction. Broken Hive carapaces, molten fragments of human steel, frozen bodies tumbling silently through the void. Halcyon reached shudder from the shockwaves that had torn the blockade apart, its outer hull cracked but intact. For the first time in months, the station's viewport showed open space beyond the swarm. Inside the command chamber, the atmosphere was hushed. Counselors gathered around tactical holos that now displayed emptiness where once the Hive had pressed. For the first time, the threat had recoiled. Yet the price was everywhere. A technician's voice quivered. Confirmed losses: for human corvettes destroyed, 2 frigates disabled, more than half their fleet unfit for another major engagement. Counselor Sarah's stomach tightened. She pictured those battered ships still limping in orbit, hulls scorched, engines coughing sparks. Humanity had held the line, but barely. The scale counselor, Threx, leaned forward, his expression sour. They are broken. What remains of their fleet cannot protect us from another assault. Sarah snapped, sharper than she intended. They bought us breathing space. Without them, none of us would be here to speak. The chamber quieted. No one could deny it. On the Blackthorn, Commander Elias Cade stood in the infirmary. Rows of wounded lay across makeshift cots. Burns, shattered limbs, shrapnel wounds hastily bound. The air reeked of antiseptic and charred metal. A medic brushed past him, muttering, "We're out of stim packs. Morphine's down to rations. Hull repairs take priority, but half the engineering crew is in here already." Elias nodded grimly. Every choice now meant trading one necessity for another. He stopped beside a young ensign, barely 20, his arm bound in bloody bandages. The boy looked up with hollow eyes. "Sir, did we win?" Elias crouched, meeting his gaze. "We're still standing. That counts as a win." The boy tried to smile, then sank into restless sleep. Later, in the bridge conference alcove, Elias called his remaining captains on HoloLink. Their faces flickered with exhaustion. "We've cracked their blockade," Elias began. "But the hive isn't finished. You've seen their regrouping signals. They'll hit back harder." Captain Reyes of the Ironclad scowled. "Half my gunners are gone. We're patching the hull with scrap plating. If they come again, we won't hold." Another captain cut in. "We should fall back, regroup outside the system. Save what's left." Elias's jaw tightened. "If we pull out now, the station dies. Every civilian aboard is butchered or consumed. That's not an option." The silence that followed was heavy. None of them wanted to admit the truth. Retreat was survival, but at the cost of abandoning those they had bled to save. Finally, Reyes exhaled. "Then we fight with what's left. But we need allies, Elias. One fleet won't be enough." Elias nodded. That's where Counselor Syrah comes in. The meeting between humans and counselors was tense. Syrah and Threx represented Halcyon Reach. Elias arrived still in battle-worn uniform, sleeves scorched, boots caked with soot. His presence filled the chamber not with grandeur, but with unshakable weight. Threx wasted no time. "You cannot defend us. You've proven your ferocity, but you are too few. The hive will return, and when they do, your kind will die with us." Elias leaned forward, voice low and steady. "Maybe, but we didn't come here to save ourselves. We came because you called. Abandoning you was never on the table." Syrah studied him carefully. His words carried no arrogance, no plea for gratitude, only blunt certainty. "What do you need from us?" she asked. "Access to your long-range transmitters," Elias said. "Ours are shot. We need to broadcast beyond this sector, call in anyone who still remembers what solidarity means." Threx barked a bitter laugh. "We already tried. The Corps ignored us. The guilds cut ties. No one will answer. Someone will," Elias said flatly. "Maybe not the powerful, maybe not the polished, but someone. That's how humanity fights, one ally at a time, until we're not alone." Syrah felt the words cut deep. She had heard hopeless promises before, but never one spoken with such conviction. She turned to Threx. "We owe them this chance." Threx's throat frills darkened, but he said nothing more. As repairs dragged on, whispers spread to the refugee decks. Humans walked the station's corridors, uniforms bloodstained, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. To the civilians, they looked like predators, and yet predators who had bled for strangers. A mother clasped a soldier's hand, tears in her eyes. "You fought when no one else came. Thank you." The soldier only nodded, too weary to speak. But the moment carried through the crowd. For the first time, gratitude outweighed fear. In the Hive flagship, Marshal Exorca coiled within its command chamber. Pain echoed to the swarm link from the destroyed carriers, fueling fury. "The Deathworlders," the Hive voice hissed. "Fragile, yet they cut deep. Their defiance festers. They must be extinguished before others follow." Across the brood, the command rippled outward. The next assault would not be a blockade. It would be annihilation. Back aboard the Blackthorn, Elias stood alone at the viewport. Debris drifted like grave markers across the stars. Each twisted fragment marked a crew he had lost, faces he would never see again. His second officer approached quietly. "Message relays are aligned. Council transmission arrays will carry your words across 6 sectors." Elias nodded. "Then let's give the galaxy a choice. Silence or resistance." She hesitated. "Do you think anyone will answer?" Elias's eyes never left the wreckage outside. "If they don't, then it's just us. And that will have to be enough." On Halcyon Reach, Counselor Syrah watched the humans work with relentless focus. They carried grief in silence, but never slowed. The beacon that had once been a symbol of despair was now a weapon of defiance. She found herself whispering to no one. Perhaps the stars are listening after all. The transmission pulse began, spreading outward into the dark. Across the wreckage-strewn system, silence stretched. No answer yet, only waiting. But the call was no longer desperate. It was a challenge. The transmission pulsed outward, vanishing into endless dark. On Halcyon Reach, every console hummed with the echo of their plea. The council chamber was hushed, each figure straining for a reply that never came. Hours passed. Refugees returned to their cots. Engineers limped back to repairs. Still, silence reigned. Then the hive came back. The first warning was a shudder in long-range sensors, a wave of mass moving in formation. Technicians scrambled to calculate numbers, their voices faltering as the truth spread. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands of drones, a full swarm converging on the system. Syrah gripped the rail. Her throat went dry. This is retribution. In orbit, the battered human fleet was already shifting. Engines flared. Weapons, cracked and patched, charged for one last stand. On the Blackthorn, alarms screamed as tactical feeds filled with crimson. Commander Elias Cade absorbed the data with steady eyes. "So, They're coming to finish it. Captain Reyes's face appeared on comms. We don't have the ships. We barely have ammunition. Elias spoke without hesitation. Then we make every shot count. No one argued. The swarm descended like a tidal wave. Drones shrieked across void channels, their organic cannons belching fire. The Hive flagship pulsed at their center, Marshal Exorca's mind radiating hunger. Extinguish them. Consume them. Silence their defiance forever. Human ships surged forward. Corvettes dove headlong, firing their last missiles into the thickest concentrations before being torn apart. Destroyers spat rail slugs until their barrels cracked. The Blackthorn led from the front, shields flaring under constant assault. Forward platings burning through, an officer shouted. Reinforce it with auxiliary grid. Elias ordered. We hold until the last. The deck shuddered as a drone slammed against the hull, mandibles chewing through steel. Gunners rotated cannons and shredded it point blank, Ichor spraying into vacuum. Inside Halcyon reach, panic rippled. Civilians clutched each other as the Hive filled every viewport. Some cried that the humans were doomed. Others prayed silently. Sarah stood at the glass, refusing to look away. Every flash of nuclear fire, every streak of a rail slug carving through chitin, carved itself into her memory. Deathworlders were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to keep strangers alive. On the Blackthorn, the bridge was fire and chaos. Smoke filled the air. Displays flickered with static. The crew fought through it, voices steady even as systems failed. A lieutenant reported. We're down to one missile rack, half charge on the main railgun. Elias's jaw clenched. Save it for the flagship. If we cut off the head, the swarm stumbles. He knew it wouldn't end the Hive, but it might buy time for Halcyon Reach to escape. Marshal Exorca sensed the humans' defiance and swelled with fury. The swarm pressed harder, drones hurling themselves in suicidal waves. Prey should flee. Prey should despair. Why do these creatures fight as if born for war? The question seared through the Hive link, unanswered. A detonation shook the void as the ironclad drove straight into the swarm, reactors overloading. The explosion tore open hundreds of drones in a single blinding flare. On Blackthorn's bridge, Captain Reyes's voice echoed for the last time over comms. Make it count, Elias. Static followed. The crew pressed on. The Hive flagship loomed ahead, vast as a continent, its surface alive with writhing tendrils and gun spines. Elias's eyes narrowed. That's the mark. Helm. Full burn. The ship lurched forward, engines screaming. Drones clawed at their flanks, but railguns blasted a path. The last missile streaked across the void, slamming into flagship's hull with a flash that cracked its carapace open. Main gun ready. The weapons officer barked. Fire. The rail slug tore across kilometers, striking the wounded section. The flagship shuddered, Ichor erupting into space, entire decks rupturing under the blow. Marshal Exorca's shriek carried across the swarm, a psychic wail of fury and pain. The drones faltered for the first time, but the cost was immediate. The Blackthorn took a direct plasma strike. The bridge rocked violently, consoles exploding. Crew were thrown from their stations. Elias gripped the railing, vision blurred from the impact. Status, he demanded. Engines failing. Hull integrity, 30%. Then we've done our part, Elias said quietly. On Halcyon Reach, technicians shouted over each other. The Hive flagship is crippled. Their formation is breaking. Refugees cheered, the sound echoing through every corridor. Sarah felt her chest tighten. Against the impossible, humanity had struck a god, yet the swarm still pressed. Numbers alone threatened to bury the survivors. And then the stars answered. New signals flared across sensors. Ships dropping out of faster than light, dozens at first, then hundreds. Not core fleets, not polished guild armadas. Independent vessels, border militias, merchant escorts refitted for war. Every one of them had heard the humans' transmission. Their commander spoke in a chorus of fractured accents, voices carried across comms. Halcyon Reach, this is the Rim Protectorate. Free colonies responding, arming for battle. Civilian convoys Starforge entering combat formation. Sarah pressed a hand to her lips. They had come. Elias's officers shouted across the burning bridge as the new arrivals slammed into the Hive flank. Drones scattered under fresh barges. The tide shifted in a heartbeat. His second officer gripped his arm. Sir, reinforcements, hundreds of ships. Elias let out a long breath. Relief flickered across his face. The first since the siege began. Told you someone would answer. The crew stared at him, battered and bloodied, and for the first time, they allowed themselves to believe survival was possible. Marshal Exorca writhed within its failing flagship. The prey had multiplied. The swarm buckled under fire from every side. For the first time in its existence, the Hive mind whispered a retreat. The battle raged for hours, but momentum was broken. Reinforcements drove the swarm back, ship by ship, until the hive scattered into dark space. The blockade was no more. When silence finally fell, Halcyon Reach erupted in celebration. Refugees flooded corridors, shouting, weeping, embracing. In the council chamber, Threx muttered bitterly. The humans drew others here through madness, not wisdom. Sarah's gaze softened. Sometimes madness is the only wisdom left. On the ruined bridge of the Blackthorn, Elias sat slumped in his chair. Smoke curled around him. Medics hurried to pull wounded to safety, but he refused to leave until the last status reports came in. A comm officer approached. The station reports survival. Reinforcements are holding the perimeter. We made it. Elias exhaled slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. Good. Then it was worth it. He closed his eyes briefly, remembering the faces of those lost. Victory had come at a cost that could never be repaid. But the station lived. The call had been answered. From that day forward, the story spread. Not of fleets of empire or guilds of wealth, but a handful of Deathworlders who stood when no one else did. And across the stars, whenever the abandoned sent out a plea into the void, they whispered a single hope. Maybe the humans will come.